Warm greetings to all of you. Today we'll be dealing with one of the most celebrated hymns of the Vedic corpus, namely the Purusha Sukta. But before we enter into the Purusha Sukta proper, I wish I will spend a few minutes about the importance of Vedic mantras and the correct interpretation of the meaning of the Vedic mantras. As you are aware, there are four Vedas broadly classified as the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, the Atharvana Veda, and of course the Yajur Veda. All of Vedas, all the Vedic mantras deal with the absolute reality, and this absolute reality is beyond the sense of perception that ordinary human beings have. It is beyond the senses, it is beyond the physical existence, it is beyond space and time, and it is beyond all dualities which one experiences in the ordinary state of consciousness. The Vedic rishis who experienced this kind of a reality have described their encounters with it in flowing poetic language, particularly in the Rig Veda. And therefore, these mantras are not only description of the reality as such, but also a prescription of the path that one can follow to attain that reality. Let me repeat again that the Vedic mantras sung by these rishis, both male and female, not only describe a reality, but they also evoke and invoke that reality in the person who recites them meaningfully. And therefore, for ages, perhaps for 10,000 years or more than 10,000 years of recorded history, all of Hindu thought has hailed the Vedas as the greatest body of language from which all forms of truth descend. However much people have praised the Vedas, somehow and somewhere down the generations, the real meaning and import of the Vedic mantras has been lost. Perhaps somewhere coinciding with the advent of Buddhism and later with the invasion of the Muslims, the Hindu culture became decadent and it failed to recognize the real import of the Vedic mantras. So much so that the Mimamsakas, for example, thought that the meaning of the Vedic mantras are secondary and the Vedic mantras are useful only for performing the external rituals which are called yagnas. So these yagnas became extremely important and people came to the conclusion that to fulfill one's worldly desires, one has to perform the right yagna accompanied by the right mantra. But the meaning of the mantras were pushed to the secondary position. It was Sayanacharya, who himself was a great votary of this Mimamsaka thought, who found it fit, very strangely, to comment at all on the meaning of Rigveda. His Rigveda Bhashya was in fact an aberration because till then nobody had, at least among the scholarly lot, thought it fit to write any kind of commentary on the meaning of these mantras. It should be remembered that Sayanacharya was the brother of Madhavacharya, who went on to become Vidyaranya Maharshi and who inspired Harihara and Bukka to found the Vijayanagara Empire. So therefore, the Bhashya of Sayanacharya is a very recent one, just written in the 14th century. Now this ascribes extremely external and physical meanings to the words that one finds in the Vedas. For example, the word cow, the word grita, the word ashwa, etc. are transcribed or translated quite literally to mean ghee or cow or horse. Along with this, there is one other aberration that Sayanacharya does. Instead of giving a fixed meaning to a word wherever it appears in any mantra, he interprets the same word in different ways in different mantras. In this sense, the word acquires a contextual meaning and therefore different mantras appear to take different ludicrous meanings although the same words are used. The net result is that the body of the mantras that Sayanacharya translated, when read by an ordinary man, appears a lot of gibberish, a confused lot. So when the Europeans, the early lot of Europeans who came to India and started studying our scripts including the Rig Veda, when they started going through the commentary of Sayanacharya, which was itself based on Brahmanas, and Brahmanas themselves are commentaries on the Vedas, they found that the whole commentary is highly confusing, and therefore they came to the conclusion that the rishis were nomadic poets who belonged to an early era of civilization, who worshipped imaginary or real elements of nature, and therefore they pushed the entire Hindu thought as nomadic or pre-nomadic and uncivilized or even barbaric. It was only the Upanishads, which was supposed to be the crystallized thought of the Vedas, which was supposed to have any intellectual meaning. It should be noted that Upanishads was composed many centuries after the Vedas and is supposed to have a continuity of the Vedas. Is supposed to be a continuity of the Vedas because Upanishads itself refers to many of the mantras as being ascribed to ancient Vedic rishis. The language of the Upanishads is more linear and is therefore easy to fit into the logical mind of the modern positivists. However, one should realize that the real importance of the Vedas is not in ascribing an external meaning, but in describing an inner reality. If you want to describe an inner reality, it is inevitable that the Vedic rishis use external elements, external symbols, external words, external phenomena with which they are familiar. However, we should not confuse the words and symbols used literally. So therefore, we can ascribe two levels of meaning broadly to the Vedic mantras. One, the exoteric or the external meaning, and the other, the esoteric or the inner meaning. This clue was provided for the first time by Sri Aurobindo, who himself was a great sage, and by the time he actually went through some of the Rigvedic mantras, he already had an inner experience of what was actually described in the Vedas. So therefore, when he read these mantras, he could easily connect with the description of the reality in those mantras and able to unlock the symbolic meaning in these mantras. Following the clues of Aurobindo, Sri T.V. Kapali Shastri, who had connections both with Sri Aurobindo as well as Sri Ramana Maharshi, and himself was a great sadhaka and a Sanskrit and Vedic scholar, went on to interpret the Vedic mantras, particularly the Rig Veda, in terms of the inner or the esoteric meaning. Now there are three schools of thought on the Vedic mantras. One school of thought, which is of course a very popular one, ascribed to the European scholars and many of the Indic schools in various universities, both Indian and foreign, conclude that Vedic mantras were early compositions of nomadic Aryans, whoever they are, and therefore of very little significance to us except being historically important. The second thought says that Vedas are crafted in a coded language, and to enter or understand the real secret of the Vedas, one need to decode these words. In other words, the Vedic words have to be deciphered. Their meaning has to be broken into. But there is a third view, which is the view of Sri Aurobindo and the modern savants like Ram Swarup and David Frawley. They say that the meaning of the Vedic mantras are not forcibly hidden by any trick or coding, but the secrecy lies in the very nature of things, in the very nature of encounter with the reality. Unless the sadhaka enters into a purified state of mind, he will never be able to grasp the inner meaning of the Vedic mantras. As long as the sadhaka dwells in an external or a physical world, the meaning that he will understand and come out with will also be external. And therefore, the secrecy is not tortured or forced, but natural. The second point that one should note is that when you are describing a reality which is beyond description, it is inevitable that symbols are used. Now, these symbols are part of not only the Vedic lore but mystic lores of all traditions across the world, some of whom have disappeared but some are surviving even to this day. So, therefore, let us realize that the Vedic mantras can be interpreted only with a pure heart. Purer the heart, purer the manas, purer the level of perception that we enter into the Vedic mantras, purer and deeper the levels of meanings revealed to us. If, however, we take an external mind to it, the meaning revealed will also be external, and therefore our interpretation will be purely exoteric. In fact, Professor S.K. Ramchandra Rao informs us that traditionally there were three levels of interpretation of the Vedic mantras. Two levels were external. That means they pertain to the Adi Bhautika and Adi Daivika. Adi Bhautika, purely materialistic. Adi Daivika, pertaining to the deities. Adi Bhautika and Adi Daivika were collectively called the Adhyagna meaning. But the third level of meaning was always considered as very important by early commentators like Yaska. The third level of commentary was based on the Adhyatma or the spiritual meaning. It is this meaning that we need to grasp. And therefore, this noble work of throwing light on the inner meaning of the Vedic mantras, particularly the Rig Veda, has been done by a great man who lives among us, namely Dr. R.L. Kashyap. Dr. R.L. Kashyap has combined the thoughts and ideas of Sri Aurobindo and Sri T.V. Kapali Shastri and has come out with extensive translations both in Kannada and English of some of the most popular and important mantras of the Rig Vedic Samhita. He has also translated some of the mantras of Yajurveda, Atharvana Veda, etc. And therefore, my commentary is simply a reiteration of whatever Sri R.L. Kashyap has said. However, you will find that I will be adding some of my own insights, whatever worth they are, during the course of this discussion on the Purusha Sukta. Hence, when you listen to this interpretation of the Purusha Sukta or other Vedic mantras that I am going to plan in the coming days, you will find that this interpretation to be almost completely at odds with the interpretation that you find in normal standard textbooks and commentaries. If luckily you have not read any previous commentary, then you will have a free and open mind which is unburdened and able to accept this interpretation. Whatever it is, the very purpose of giving a broad meaning to these mantras is to make us approach the mantras with greater devotion and greater sense of involvement. The real meaning of the mantras will unfold only when we progress spiritually, when we lift our levels of consciousness to various planes of existence. Hence, whatever meaning we give, whether external or internal, exoteric or esoteric, will become meaningful only when we put it into practice in the cave of our heart. The cave of our heart is described in the Vedas as Guhahitam. It is in this cave that our true self exists, and it is to this true self that we address all our thoughts and all our actions.